Welcome to Kickstarter 201, Comics, Rewards, and Fulfillment. So hopefully, I think most of you were here for 101. I think we had a couple new faces. So 201 goes a little more depth, into some more depth of what we're doing. You're here at Kickstarter, in case you didn't know, in case you walked in the door and were like, where the heck am I? You're at Kickstarter headquarters, so welcome, we're glad to have you. My name is Craig Engler. That's what I look like on Kickstarter. I'm the entertainment guy here at Kickstarter. I come from the Hollywood world. I worked at NBC Universal. Probably the biggest campaign I've worked on is Reading Rainbow, if anyone ever heard of that, with LeVar Burton. So those guys did a great, yeah, hands out for them, not to me. I didn't do anything, but they did a great campaign. I've also backed a lot of campaigns. It actually says there I've backed 45 projects. That's actually since I started working for Kickstarter. Before I worked for Kickstarter, I had backed about 60 projects under a different profile that I had to create a new one when I came, and I was really bummed that I lost all my other ones. So I backed about 100 projects. I also did my own comics project, something called Lovecraft, the blasphemously large first issue, which did really well last year. And one of our panelists who's here, and you'll introduce them in a couple, or I'll introduce them in a couple seconds, is George Rohack, and he helped me with that. So thank you, George. We are primarily here to talk about rewards and fulfillments. If you have done a Kickstarter project, you know that one of the things that happens at the end of a project is you have to fulfill rewards. In comics, it's a great category because when you make a thing, right, like the thing that you want to make is usually the thing that you're giving people, and comics make great rewards. So you guys are in the right place for comics. Let's talk a second about pricing rewards. So $25 is the most common pledge across all of Kickstarter. It doesn't mean you need a $25 reward. $20, $27, $30, something in that ballpark. That's one of the most common rewards. 5 to 7 is the ideal number of rewards, and when we say that, we mean core rewards. You'll, especially in comics projects, you'll see them 12, 15, 30 rewards, but a lot of those are big one-offs, like, oh, it's a commission from the artist, or your name in the book, or something like that. But you really want 5 to 7 core rewards. $100 is the tier that generates the most money across all of Kickstarter. So even though more people pledge at the $25 level, when somebody is at the $100 tier, they're giving you more money, and ultimately you'll make more money off of that tier. So you generally want something in the $25 tier and something in the $100 tier. We actually recommend that you have, a lower tier for those people who want to back but might not have enough money or might not be able to contribute money at this time, like a $1 or $5 reward. Maybe a step up would be a 10 or 15, then you have your 25, probably something in the 45, 50 range. We also recommend that you have some really big, juicy rewards because you'll never know like who walks in with a lot of money. I was very surprised on the project I ran that a very well-known horror film director backed the project, and he just chose the top tier because he had a lot of money, and so he was giving the most he had, and if I had had a higher tier, he would have backed that. It's actually not at all uncommon to see people kind of come out, sort of people who have a lot of money and are very interested in supporting your thing to sort of come out of the woodwork and support a project. What is a project reward? Generally speaking, a project reward is a copy of the thing that you're making. It can be a look at the creative process behind making it, and it can be a shared experience. This is the comic book cover for Code Monkey Save World. A friend of mine, Greg Pock, did this project. I think he raised about $350,000, and the main thing that you got was the actual copy of the book. A copy of comics is great because you can do it in a couple ways. On a base level, there's a digital comic. If you're going to create a print comic, you're going to have a digital version of it anyway, so you can easily give that out as a PDF. One of the great things about digital comics is they're easy to fulfill. There's no printing or shipping costs. And you, generally speaking, already have it done. In terms of a copy of the thing, the basic reward of most comics projects will be a print comic. And then you can also do a limited edition, which is specially created for your backers. Limited editions do great on Kickstarter. It's something unique that they get for backing your project and that no one else in the world will be able to get unless they are supporting your Kickstarter campaign. So keep in mind that limited editions are great. Other common rewards for comics projects are prints from the art, commissions by the artists, original art. So the artist on my project actually has 32 pages of original art, and we had people who pledged to get the art. Scripts, so if you're a writer, you can have your script. You can either do paper scripts, print scripts. Some people actually will print a comic that has the artwork and then the script side by side, so you can see that. That's an awesome reward. Signed editions, along with limited editions. Signed editions are great. And then behind the scenes access, so showing them in some way how the comic is made. A lot of times there's character sketches and design sketches and all that in the comic that sort of flesh it out. So those are all great things to add. There are also experiential rewards. Offer something that is specific to your talents. I'll explain this in a second. IRL, meet your backers in real life. I know it's comics. I know that a lot of times there's not in real life stuff with comics, but it's actually really cool to meet your backers in real life. And also boost your ego. You can offer rewards to have your backers, their names in the book, their likeness in the book. I actually had an executive, I'm a TV guy, so I put an executive producer credit on my comic and said, hey, if you want an executive producer credit, you can back at this level. I primarily did it as a joke, and it was one of the first things that someone bought. And what I gave them for that is I allowed them to actually produce the comic. I sent them the script, I sent them the art. They actually were encouraged to give me notes, and they caught an error in the comic, so it all worked out well for me. In terms of these 3 rewards, so here's an example. The first one is one of our panelists, Heather Antos. She is an editor, and one of her rewards was she'll edit your comic. So when I was saying before, offer a service that's specific to your talents, that was a great one that Heather did. Amy Chu, another one of our guests tonight, or our panelists tonight, she goes to a lot of comic book conventions and she has tables at them. And a lot of times at those tables, you're running around and having drinks with the people around you or getting food. So she offered to deliver a cup of Java or tea and a box of Girl Scout cookies, your choice of Thin Mints or Samoa's, AKA Caramel Delights, to your or a friend at a time you specify. So I thought that was really great. And then this is, in my project, you had your name and likeness in the book, and it was a Lovecraft project. So I wrote, probably as someone who dies horribly. I think that was like the 3rd, big level reward that went. Leaving Megalopolis was a great project by Gail Simone and her artist, James Calafiore, and they had this awesome reward, which was a script review. Not only would Gail, who writes for everybody in DC and all sorts of stuff, not only would she read your script and critique it and give you comments, but then Jim would read your script and give you comments from the artist's perspective. And I thought, wow, where are you ever going to be able to do that other than a Kickstarter reward? Can also do like-minded rewards for your project. So figurines, because comics and action figures go together. T-shirts, you think of that as sort of wearable backer support. If somebody is willing to back your campaign, they probably are willing to wear a T-shirt about your campaign and probably want that. And then thematic stuff that's unique to your project. I'll show you a couple quick examples. This is a figurine from Code Monkey Save World, the book I showed you before that Greg Pak did. And the really cool thing about this is it actually came in 6 pieces and you kind of assembled it. So it was kind of like a model/figurine. And you could sort of DIY, so it had this great component. And I mean, that's just an awesome figurine right there. Tank Girl, which they came to Kickstarter recently, they did limited edition Tank Girl t-shirts. I only want the one that has Lori Petty on it, but I'll take the other one as well. Did anyone see that movie but me? One guy, all right. Lori Petty was the Tank Girl in the movie. And then thematic rewards, this is a favorite of mine, this is from Atomic Robo. Atomic Robo was born in a lab, so you could get a lab coat, and one of their high-end rewards was, it was a damaged lab coat because Atomic Robo was born in a lab accident. So I thought that was really genius to have a damaged lab coat. Some other uncommon rewards. This is from God Hates Astronauts, which Ryan Brown did. Ryan is awesome, and Ryan is crazy. So Ryan did a bunch of the best rewards I've ever seen. These are all from one project. He had a theme song. He had a defaced edition where he would go through and just deface the comic. This was my favorite. He would ship the comic to you upside down. He also shipped it to you backwards and sideways. And all of those sold, and they were at strange levels too. It was like limited to 67, limited to 22. I think he just randomly picked numbers. Kind of a gross one was the face oil edition, where he would actually take the comic and press his cheek into every page and send it to you. I didn't select that reward. I don't know who did, but all I was thinking is, geez, Ryan, if like 100 people chose that, you'd just be doing this for days, but he knows what he's doing. The insult edition, where he scrawled insults in the comic, and those all sold out. And then actually one of the really awesome ones was, He would write and draw your origin story for you in his art style, which is insane. So think of when you are thinking about rewards, think of really fun, crazy stuff that you can do in addition to the standard stuff. Also, when it comes to rewards, you really need to do the math. And George Rohack, who's going to speak with us, is a master at this. But there is a magic formula when it comes to rewards, which is the pledge amount minus the cost of the reward that you're fulfilling for that amount, minus the shipping, minus the fees that Kickstarter and Stripe take. Kickstarter has a 5% platform fee, and Stripe has 3 to 5%. So, and that is going to, whatever is left over after that is what you'll be able to put towards your project. And let me just give you a more concrete example of that. So if you have a $25 reward, and let's say that reward costs you $5 to make, it costs you $5 to ship, and then because it's 25, you take roughly 10% for Kickstarter and Stripe. That means all of that money will eat up $12.50, and that will leave you with $12.50 to make your project. So when you're doing rewards, remember, the more money you make, also, generally speaking, the more rewards you have to make, and that's a good thing, but you kind of want to do the math ahead of time to know, like, oh, I need X amount of rewards to actually get this much money. If a $25 reward nets me $12.50, then how much times $12.50 do I need to make my project? So keep that in mind. Fulfillment is something else we're going to talk about. Choose your packaging wisely. Some packaging thoughts are, do you want to do custom sizes? Custom boxes cost more than standard boxes. Are you going to have multiple packages, or can you ship everything in one package? I had a friend of mine who got very excited. He was doing a comics project, and his backers said, you should add a t-shirt. I was like, awesome, I'm adding a t-shirt. And then he realized he couldn't fit a t-shirt into the stuff he'd already bought for the comic, the packaging for the comic. So then he had to get more packaging and then ship 2 items instead of 1. So you want to think about that ahead of time. Your storage space. There was somebody who did a $10,000 comic book project. He raised about $120,000. Thought that was awesome. Who wouldn't think that's awesome? The day the semi-truck pulled up in front of his house and said, we have 3 pallets, not 3 boxes, 3 pallets of boxes for you and your comic. Where do you want to store them? He ran out of space in his house, and he said, I was standing in there on the street. I called everybody I knew. They would drive up in the car, and I would give them boxes, and they'd drive away. And he's like, I felt like some kind of comic book drug dealer. And he said, I never thought in a million years I would not have space for all the comics that I was printing. So you have to think about that. Think about your effort, right? You don't want to create really cool, really awesome rewards that then take you more time to create and fulfill than the actual project itself will take. So just keep that in mind. Again, people will be like, I want to do an action figure for my comic. And I was like, okay, well, do you know how to create an action figure? Do you know how to source an action figure? Do you know how to get a fab in China to create it, ship it, package it? Most people don't. So what you want to do is kind of think about how much time will it take me to fulfill this stuff. When I was working with LeVar Burton and Reading Rainbow, they wanted to do dinners with LeVar at a very high price point. I can't remember what it was. It was probably like $5,000. And they said, how many do you want to do? And LeVar was like, I'll do 100. And I said, LeVar, you're a working actor, you're a director, you own Reading Rainbow. I was like, do you really want to spend 1 out of every 3 nights for the next year having dinner with people? And he's like, you're right. He's like, I'll do 5, right? So think about that beforehand, think about the time it'll take. A super pro tip that I just learned myself when I was on a Kickstarter panel at Emerald City Comic Con is the United States Post Office will pick up. So if you have 300 packages that you have labels and shipping for, you can call the post office and they'll come pick it up. You don't have to be that person standing in line at the post office with 300 packages in that line that everyone's like, oh, I don't want to get behind them. So that's a pro tip. And then also, if your Kickstarter does very, very well and you have a lot of things to ship, that's kind of a point in time where you might consider using a fulfillment company. Another huge, huge tip is visit the post office. And by that I mean mock up a package of your finished reward, take it to the post office, and have them tell you how much it's going to cost to ship, not only in the US, but in other places in the world. There are a couple of countries where it costs a lot of money to send things. I had someone who had done a $10 reward, and it cost them $45 to send it to Australia. So yeah, they were not making any money at that at all. Now, you can specify on Kickstarter what amount that you want per country. So you can say like, oh, in the US, shipping will be $5, but in Australia, it'll be like $30. And generally, the people in those countries know that they have to spend a lot of money to have a US product shipped to them. So just go to the post office and know ahead of time, because you don't want to have like 100 people from Spain just back my project. That's awesome. And now I am losing money on 100 of my rewards that I ship. So that can be difficult. Some common pitfalls to avoid. Think simple. How much time will it really take? The guy who got all those boxes shipped to him, he said he had so many that he got up at 6 in the morning and shipped boxes for 3 hours every day for 6 months until he fulfilled all his rewards. So think about how much time it's going to take you. Think flat. This is one of my favorite tips for comics creators, is think about extra rewards that you can just put inside the comic. Postcards, stickers, book plates are all great things that are extras for comics that are very easy to fulfill. Not coincidentally, my rewards for my project were a postcard, a sticker, and a book plate, because I've learned from the last year talking to people who've done comics that was a really smart thing to do. And then finally, don't go crazy. If your Kickstarter campaign is doing amazingly well and people are saying, oh, add a t-shirt, do a branded harmonica, whatever it is, like just think about, okay, where am I going to get a harmonica? Will that fit in my package? How long will that take? What's the manufacturing process? Like, you might have a great idea for a harmonica and then you realize, oh wow, it takes 6 months to get harmonicas printed and created and shipped, or however they even make harmonicas. So you kind of have to, in the heat of things, you might want to add something. It's really cool. Someone's emailing you saying, please add this, please do that. Just think it through before you say yes, because you might end up in a situation where you're having a hard time fulfilling it because you didn't quite figure out ahead of time how much time it would take. Does that all that make sense to everyone? All right, somebody nodded, so I'm going to take that as all of you nodding. So that's some stuff that I've learned for a year in Kickstarter. I also want to share the wisdom of our panelists. So we have Heather Antos. Heather, come on up. Heather did Unlawful Good. This is an anthology of crime that Heather put together and edited and did such a good job that it actually got her a job at Marvel. Yeah. So congratulations.
Thank you.
George Rohack, the CEO of Bread Pig, which is the, oh my God, George, how do you describe Bread Pig? It's the sidekick for hire. Among many, many, many projects, I pulled out Augie the Green Knight because I happen to love this, and it's by my friend Zach.
Awesome.
So nice job, George. Let's give George a hand. And then we have Amy Chu, a friend of mine who's done 2 projects, including Girls Night Out and Girls Night Out. What was the subtitle of Girls Night Out?
Tales of New York.
Tales of New York. Welcome, Amy. Hey. So I have a couple questions to ask you guys about fulfillment and rewards, and then we can go into a general Q&A. But first, one of the things I wanted to know is, George, how many campaigns have you worked on?
Nearing 50.
Nearing 50. Amy has not only done your 2, but you've helped many, many people. And Heather, you've behind the scenes helped many, many people. So not only have you done your own projects, but you've helped a lot of people. So what makes good rewards that are, great for backers, not terrible for the creators to make, not deadly on shipping in the comics category? What would you guys say?
I think if you're an artist or your artist is willing, or you have, like for me, I had, I think, a total of something like 20, 25 artists working on my project. People love original art, and original art can be any size. And something that was super, super popular with me and sold out, it was the first thing to sell out, was sketch cards.
Oh, yeah.
Really tiny, little 2x3 things, and the backers could pick any character they wanted out of anything. And then it's just a little sketch on a card.
And what was the price point for a sketch card?
I did it at $50 because at that point you got you got your name in the book, you got the digital copy, you got the book itself, which is like a 200-page anthology. You got the print, and then you got a piece of original art with it. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Cool. Amy, what would you say?
Yeah, well, here's the thing about fulfilling rewards. It can be a real bear. So what I tried to do was come up with rewards that were fun for the backers, but also fun for me to do. So I did. I mean, really, it gets kind of a drag after you've been stuffing like hundreds of envelopes if you get so lucky. So what I tried to do was to do experience-based rewards. And because, I'm on the Comic-Con circuit quite a bit, what I did, which turned out to be very successful and more people are doing it, is to do like breakfast with creators, people who are in the book, who are artists or writers or just friends of mine who are very helpful, and just say, hey, have breakfast with so-and-so, with Greg Pak, with Fred Van Lente or Jamal Eigel, or people that, who you're fans of. And that turned out to work really well. Jimmy Palmiotti was great. We did a lunch with Jimmy Palmiotti. That sold out in like a nanosecond. And the pricing for those, generally, it also depended on where we were going to eat. So I think I worked out a good price point, depending on the person and where you're going to have the meal, is between $75 and $150, including the book. And so they would sign the book and have a really nice meal, and we would try to limit that to maybe 5 or 10 people max.
Awesome. George?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of recommending to people kind of, like you were saying, experience behind the scenes stuff. So names in books, being drawn in backgrounds, anything that, what I typically describe to people as is anything that doesn't add weight but has tremendous value that they would not get if they were just buying it from you or buying it from Amazon. And so, little things like that. One of the things we did for the Cuttings project with Yuka Oda and Anath Panagaria was there was so much content that they had for that book, which was like an art book / tons of little short comics that didn't make it into the print edition, that one of the things we did was, all right, well, we're just going to make for the backers as a additional kind of goal, a reward of a PDF that was cuttings, like the things that didn't make it into this book. And so that was like a really good thing that cost nothing to ship out because it was a digital reward. So we threw it on Google Drive and linked all of the backers to it. And yet it was something that, got people really excited to see more content, but it didn't require us to pay, another 50 cents, $1 per unit to make the book a massive tome that would have been unwieldy to ship. And so things like that. I'm a big fan of recommending those because they let you, they get people involved with it, and that is exciting to always connect with your fans that way, but it doesn't mean throwing extra things in, and yeah.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, he kind of mentioned it, but getting drawn in was I worked on a project called Andrew Jackson in Space. It was a comic project, and one of the biggest rewards that went away was, you get to be drawn as a character in this. And then the next level was, you get to be drawn as a character and you have a line in it. So not only are you in this cool comic called Andrew Jackson in Space, but you're part of it.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
The only issue I found, they're great, is you also have to fulfill those, and sometimes, the book comes out much later, and, the artist is maybe a little slower, and it's just keeping tabs on that and fulfilling
where
that.
you are in the production.
But they are great.
The trick that I recommend to people with that is that if it's something where an artist is, depending upon where the project is in the process, if you're working with an artist and they're trying to get all the pages done and they're like, I don't want to wait to find out who's going to be in this book, is to kind of shadow it out, is go, all right, well, you're going to have someone in a crowd here, or that you're going to have a character talking here. Leave a halo, do the background, or we'll do it digitally and insert them. And that's kind of the trick for working with schedules, to kind of make that a little easier if you have a schedule that you're trying to keep, but you want to accommodate something like that.
That's why this is the 201 panel, because these guys know what they're doing. Is there any kind of rewards that you would stay away from?
Anything that's awkwardly shaped. So say you want to do like you were mentioning an action figure, or a statue or something physical. Not only are these heavier, which they up your shipping prices, but they're not flat. They don't fit in an envelope. You have to get a box, and sometimes you have to get a specific size box to ship this awkward thing that's going to cost $20 to ship. Or if it's sent to Australia,
Yeah.
this $20 was going to cost you $150 to ship. And not only, it will also cost you more to make.
And by the way, there are some campaigns where people sort of choose to not get involved with the international shipping just by saying, well, I'll only do like a digital copy for international and I'll stick with domestic if they're uncomfortable. George and I actually talked about that, but we decided that no, it's better to send people a book. Anything that you would stay away from now that you've done a couple projects?
I've stayed away from anything that involves personalization or sizing, like T-shirts, just because I've been advised by people who've gone through it before. It's a real pain in the butt to have extra small, extra large T-shirts, and you just never really have a good. I'm sure that there are people who have a handle on that, but I've just never done anything like that. It's so much easier. What I did with my Kickstarter most recently, which worked out really well, is I did dog tags that said "I love comics" in 4 languages, and people love that, and I loved it because it didn't add any weight to the shipping. It was small. The actual cost of manufacturing was pretty low, but it looked great, so it worked out pretty well.
Yeah,
George.
no, I'm right there with you with T-shirts. Everybody loves T-shirts, and T-shirts is one of the first things everybody jumps to. But especially if you're shipping yourself, one of the cheapest options if you're mailing printed goods is media mail. You can't do that if you have something that is not a paper product.
Could you just explain what media mail is?
Media mail is like the slowest service possible. Within the domestic US, it'll get there within if I shipped something in New York, it would probably get to someone else in New York by, if I shipped it on a Monday, it would probably get to them by Friday. And the other side of the country it would take up to 2 weeks, maybe longer. Sometimes typically they say up to 10 business days. So depending upon when you ship it, but it's really, really economical. You can ship a giant box full of books for, what would normally cost $50-$60 for maybe for under 20. But the problem is that again, it has to be printed goods. If it's anything else in that box and USPS happens to open it, you are liable for giant fines. So don't do that. But
Don't scam the good Kickstarter tip. Don't scam the U.S. Post Office.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
One recommendation I do have that isn't on the USPS site, this is getting a little off track, but is there is a type of service which is not you typically don't see the boxes at the post office, but you can order them online, are regional flat rate boxes. They come in 3 different sizes, A, B, C. And they're flat rate and they're reduced cost from the typical flat rate boxes. But the way that it's flat rate is that there's Zone A, Zone B, Zone C. And depending upon where you're shipping, if you're shipping within New York and within the East Coast, I think to Ohio, it's one rate no matter where that is. And then if it's center of the country, it's this. If it's all the way to the West Coast, it's this. And if you're doing packages that have larger things in them that are kind of beyond media mail because of what you're throwing in, that's actually a lot cheaper than doing flat rate. And since it's still a priority service, you still get delivery confirmation, which is really good for making sure people know when they're getting stuff and when stuff's getting shipped out. In terms of goods, just the one thing I want to note: everybody also loves posters. I kind of hate posters. If you are personally doing posters, you can't just throw that poster in a thing unless it's a huge box. You're going to have to roll it. And I've helped years ago. I helped people out rolling 200 posters, putting them into tubes, putting the ends on the tubes, putting those tubes in a box, putting the other thing. It's a nightmare. So either avoid it. Or if you don't mind sending it out that way, some people do, ask the printer that you're getting them from, even if they're 11 by 17, to do a fold. Typically, it's only around 5 to 10 cents a unit for even with local printers for them to do that. But then that way, you have a poster that is much smaller and can go on pretty much any box.
Well, that actually is a great segue into the next question I have for you guys, which is, other than the stuff that we talked about, what are either things to avoid or things to do that you have experienced in your own campaigns? And we'll go back to Heather and then end up with George. Is there any, we've talked about some of the pitfalls. Are there anything else that we would like to, or not necessarily a pitfall, but you might not want to go down this road, you might want to do this. Are there any other big things that you would talk about?
You asked me a question, my mind goes blank.
I can come back to you. I can jump to you.
I guess the big thing for me is, make sure that if you can, and if at all possible, everything can fit into one package. That way you're not tracking multiple packages. You have person A, B, and C, and their packages are A, B, and C. And all their stuff is in them. Because, I've gotten from different Kickstarters where I've gotten like 3 separate things, which is fun for me because it's like Christmas every day. But I imagine it's a nightmare packing and then keeping track of each person. Like, okay, they have their book. Oh, now they have their T-shirt. Oh, now they have their limited edition life-size Barbie doll. Like, it's a lot.
I mean, that's actually a great thing to also consider is when you do a lot of rewards, you're going to have a lot of reward combinations that you have to choose from. Now, George is a master of spreadsheets, and he can handle that stuff like this. But for me, if I didn't have George, I would probably be like, oh my God, I forgot that so-and-so, they get T-shirt A and plaque B, and it just takes a lot of time. So when you're thinking about, I'll do 32 rewards, just remember, that's 32 things you have to track on, possibly 32 combinations of things for every backer. So that's another one that I've heard of.
Yeah, things I would have done differently. Like, and I think they sell well, but in practice, it got a little kind of hairy because I decided to do my last issue of Girls Night Out as a limited edition. So everybody would get a numbered limited edition. And it sounds great, but in practice, when the stuff arrives from the printer, you start unwrapping, and then I started putting it in, and like I got this funny idea. I think it's just like this kind of crazy anal retentiveness, is that I had to match the backer number with the limited edition number. Don't do that. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought it would make sense and it'd be kind of cute if someone figured out, I'm backer number 2 and I got number 2. It got so convoluted. And then after a point, I had it like a pack of unnumbered. I had to fake it. I just put down random numbers. No one's going to know. But at that point, I felt like, okay, I violated.
No one's going to know.
I just told everybody. I violated the whole system that I so carefully set up. So don't be like me. Just say limited edition, but you don't need to number it and do crazy stuff like that. I don't know that anyone noticed.
The other one I heard is that, so there was a writer on one side of the country and an artist on the other, and they said, we'll both sign your book. Well, that meant that they had to, because when you get a book printed, you have to pay for shipping from the printer to you. Then you have to sign all that. Then you have to pay to have it sent to your artist. Then he or she has to sign all that. And then you have to pay again to wherever they're being shipped from. So, they ended up doing like 4 times their shipping, and they said, and we could have done it in an easier way, thus book plates were someone recommended to me where those are way easier to deal with. But George, anything from your...
Yeah, I actually had a similar scenario. The first Benign Kingdom, we were like, we're going to number the limited edition book plates.
Wait, why are you telling me this? I did that for my campaign. Why did you let me do it?
Because you wanted to. I mentioned...
I should have been stopped.
I mentioned... Well, I mean, it is something like... The way you do the design and everything, there are tricks, and I mean, if you're numbering like 1 over 0 and you're trying to match the backer, like that's where it's woof. Like, and I did that, that's what we did on Benign Kingdom, and it was like halfway through the fulfillment, Casey and I watching Storage Wars, like packaging all just so we have something mindless on while we're assembling envelopes and things like, wait, was that the right backer number of like the seal putting it on? But yeah, I mean, doing like soft numbering and just being like 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that your hand is a worry. Don't match it to the backer though. But I think I kind of said like a bunch of the ones that I felt like were issues that I ran into, poster and shirts and stuff.
So let's go to the opposite side. What is like your best pro tip in terms of rewards and fulfillment? Like if you could just tell everybody, now obviously we've touched on a lot, so it's got to be something that we haven't touched on, but do you have like one, either something about time management, something about, I would have done, like, let me give you a great example. So Ben Templesmith did a book called Tome, and he made the book the size that he wanted to make the book, and then he went out and he had to get packaging for it, and there was no packaging that was the right size, so he had to get custom boxes. And he was like, I would have changed the size of the book. If I'd known, I would have had to pay for custom boxes. And then the problem he was having too is like he ordered just enough for shipping, and of course some of them get damaged or some of them are unusable or whatever, and then he's like, then I had to go back and get another one. So, and he literally said like, I just thought that was a good size for the book, but it could have been an inch shorter, and then I could have just got the regular thing from, so like I always kept that one in the back of my mind as a really great pro tip. So any pro tips before we open it up to general Q&A?
Well, I mean, I kind of lucked out. I didn't realize this when I picked my printer that they offered this service, but so in the middle of my fulfillment stage, I moved across the country. Which was not planned.
That's an anti-pro tip.
Don't move in the middle.
Don't move in the middle of fulfilling your campaign.
It was unexpected, yada, yada, yada.
I got a job at Marvel, it happened.
Yeah. But yeah, so I moved across the country, and all of a sudden I'm going from this like, Midwestern house to a tiny New York apartment. So the fact that, like, oh, I'm ordering 850 books, it's not going to exactly fit in my new home. But I found out from my printer when I was talking with them is they offer picking and packing services. And so what this means is, for every book that they pick for you, it's like 15 cents or something. And then for every additional, it's like another 10 cents. But they get cheaper shipping rates because they have deals with FedEx, UPS, and USPS. So the bulk of my rewards, they're shipping for me straight out of their warehouse. And I send them the Kickstarter export, and they will give me a tracking number for every single one. So I can see like, oh, this person is getting this, and A, B, and C. And then the remainders of like all the stuff that I did add the sketch cards to and all the other stuff they're sending to me. So I'm actually only getting like 200 books out of what could have been like 1,000.
Yeah. What was the printer you used?
Kraken.
Okay, I've heard a lot of people.
Yeah,
use
they're
Kraken.
super great people. Definitely recommend. Their prices are excellent too. Cool. A lot of options. So.
Amy, any super pro tips?
Super pro tip. Actually, I have two super pro tips.
Okay.
First one, absolutely. When you will come up with a budget for your Kickstarter, do not do it without coming up with a budget. Add a buffer to it because stuff will happen. Postal rates will increase, guaranteed, stuff will happen. So put in a minimum. I usually put in 15% of mine, just emergency, whatever happens. Maybe your printer cost went up or anything will happen or you just miscalculated. That will just save your butt. Just do not just operate on the assumption that all the costs you have researched carefully will stay the same. The second, I would say, is go, and I didn't do this before, now I do this, and now they know me. Go to your post office and make friends with the people there. Part of
Amy's a super pro.
Yeah, no, these guys are the ones who are handling all your stuff, and they will save you money when they look at your thing and say, oh no, sweetie, that's a 70% extra surcharge because it's rigid. Who knew that if it's a rigid envelope, they charge you more? It's non-machinable. Go take what you think is going to be your end packaging, go to the post office and say, hey, how much do you think this is going to cost to ship to Australia? Australia, okay, not New Jersey, Australia. Get all your costs up front and talk to the people, and they may give you that example. Had Ben Templesmith done that, they've been like, oh my God, was going to cost you $20. Go and talk to them, and they'll tell you the most efficient way to ship because that happens every day. Somebody comes in with something, and they're like, that's going to cost you $50 to ship. They know their prices, and they'll tell you, if you change your book slightly, if you make it, put in a tube, whatever, they'll give you some advice, and it's definitely helpful.
Was that both your tips, or was that one? I wasn't counting.
Yeah,
that was two. Okay, George.
One thing is whenever you're doing, as Craig showed, the breakdown of a reward tier that you're thinking of doing, never cross 50%. If that cost is over 50%, that is a bad reward tier and you need to rework it. You either need to increase the price or you need to find a way to reduce the cost of the items because you're going to, like you said, you're going to run into issues where stuff just happens, reality. So if you are working on that line where the majority of your money is going towards all of this and you don't have the safety going in towards more production, you're going to have an issue. So make sure, I typically, for most people, I recommend the ideal is getting it to 35%. And that's hard. That's certainly not, you can't do it for everything, but if you can get it there, then that's really like what I consider like really great tier. Like that means
So,
that.
so what you're saying is the expense of the tier is only 30% of, and then 70% goes to the project.
Yeah, 70% goes to like the project because again, I mean, shipping rates go up, all these things that time is going to take away from you. So you should pad as much as you can. A lot of people's inherent like, default is to go, oh, well, I want to do right by people, so I want to make this as like cheap as possible, make it as close to like my cost so that, I'm giving my fans as much as I want. And the thing that I say is like, if you wind up costing yourself a ton of money and then you aren't able to get these things to your fans, like you're doing a disservice to them then. So make sure that you're like padding enough so that you can, get your project out, get this thing out to them, and then, that way they're excited.
Cool. So we're going to open it up to audience Q&A. So I will put a giant Q&A on the screen. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and I think someone with a mic will come and track you down. So do we have any questions? Ooh, we have a bunch already.
You sort of mentioned that your printer had sort of a pick and pack service. I was just wondering if anyone else had any experience with like a fulfillment service, like Amazon Fulfillment or something like that.
No, not. I did it through my printer, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different fulfillment centers you can find. Amplifier is the one that Breadpig most commonly partners with. There's a few who we've worked with, but Amplifier is almost always the most reliable and like most cost efficient. But working with a fulfillment center, you have to realize it is not just, here's the things, buy. Your job changes. You become more of an admin than you are a like picking and packing. You have to make sure that if they have a system, like if they need advanced shipping notifications and they need boxes labeled a certain way, you need to make sure you communicate that with any vendors that you're having them ship stuff to. If they need things to be labeled with like SKUs, which is a term for like a code for a project or a specific item, you need to make sure you do that. If they need the data for shipping in a certain way, you need to make sure you do that right. I've talked with a lot of people who have worked with fulfillment centers and had a great time. We're like, this was amazing. I can't believe I shipped stuff like all this volume of stuff myself. I've also talked to people who basically didn't go into it realizing that they had to do those things, and were like, that was terrible. I can't believe like those people did that. And you just have to realize you're going into it and you're taking a different job, and there's a lot of different details you have to keep like on top of. And the fulfillment company you work with will have, different things that they'll need you to do. So.
And George, you told me, I think outside when we were talking, that there's like sort of a number where like, if it's this number, then maybe you don't use a fulfillment, but after a certain number, you kind of, like, what is that number, or do you not have a specific one in mind?
It varies per person. I mean, I would usually say once you crack 1,000, you probably don't want to ship 1,000 things yourself. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of time. I mean, and especially if you've got lots of different things, it's going to take you a lot. But yeah, I mean, the big thing, like you said, Craig, is your time has value. If you're a writer, if you're an artist, if you're a designer, your time has value. The time that you aren't doing that thing is the time that you aren't making more comics. So you need to make sure you accept the fact that that has a worth. And so if, you can go, I think I can bang out 200 in a weekend, or 200 or 300 in a weekend, or over the course of a week, get a bunch of friends over, like work this out, cool. But recognize that is time, that is a week lost of you doing comics. So just always have that in the back of your mind. Like, what is that time loss worth to you?
Yeah, and you and I talked about when I was doing my project, like if it was up to, let's say, 300 people, I was just my wife was actually gonna volunteer. She volunteered to do it, and I didn't tell her how awful it would be, so I was like, great. But if it was gonna be over like 350, I was just like, I'm gonna go right to a fulfillment company, so I could have had that in mind. So we have another question.
Is this on now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I hope I'm asking this question correctly. In any of your experience, have you found that it's more difficult to do a variety of rewards, or do you think it's more practical to sort of like stack them? So like, let's say if your $1 reward is like just a thank you, and then just add on to that as you go down the tiers. Like,
Oh, hands down. Like that was the easiest thing for me because then I'm not having, okay, this is the A package where it's, A, B, and C, and then this is the C package where it's, P, Q, and Z. It's just easier.
So you just added more, like
Yeah,
each
it's just
tier
one
included the
thing.
previous
And then once
tier.
you get to the original art stage, okay, then you have like, you get the Batman sketch, or you have this 6x9, print, or that way. There's only like, the majority of my rewards are the same thing.
There is a sweet spot, I think, of having too many crazy rewards and not having enough rewards. And I have noticed for it, I get kind of analytical because I'm always looking for a better way to run the Kickstarter, and I research a lot of Kickstarters, that the ones that don't quite make it or barely make it, they don't have enough rewards. And that's a problem. If you just have one reward and that's just the book, oftentimes that's not enough to get you over the finish line. So you do want to add stuff to it. But at the same time, sometimes it gets too crazy and you've added 20 different tiers. You don't want to do that. Just try to find a good space that you feel that you can fulfill, meaning a mix of the comics plus original art, or something that that is of interest to people. Original art will sell. A combination of doodads, the postcards, flat things. But like I said, if you start getting into the strange combinations of the shot glass and the T-shirt and 5 copies of this discounted at 20%, you don't need to do that. But don't just do my book will sell and it will sell thousands. It's
Yeah, you should also do the math ahead of time. So see, like, okay, if I sold 100 of my, comic at the $25 level, like, how much would that actually, net for my project? And it's really helpful to kind of do. George was really diligent about that when we worked together. Of like, okay, if you add that reward, then he'd give me a new spreadsheet with the tally on the bottom. And I was like, oh, really? Wow. Okay. So I'd really paid attention. George, you have a.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of I describe it to people as Voltroning, where every tier builds on the last, with the exception of like you mentioned, any sort of limited tiers. It's like those are fine to have be like, okay, well, Yuko did like one of them was like left-handed doodles, that sort of thing. And so doing stuff like that is fine, but it makes it easier on your life is that if whenever you get to shipping, like, okay, well, the $100 tier has everything that is in the 75 plus this one thing. Which also, if you're working with a fulfillment center, you can get them to collate and pre-assemble packages of multiple items that then they ship as one thing, because whenever you work with a fulfillment center, they charge for every item they pick. So everything they grab.
That's really interesting.
But if you go, hey, I want you to take these 5 items and then assemble them under SKU Kickstarter reward 75 tier, they'll take that, and the cost of them doing that is way cheaper than the cost of them picking those 5 items separately for 10, 20, 30 packages. So
That's crazy because they're doing the same work.
yeah. But the reason why the cost is different is because whenever someone has to go and pick something, they're leaving the line, going and grabbing something. And so if they're grabbing one essentially box of pre-made things to go put in another box, it's way cheaper. So
Awesome.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we have a question in the back there.
Hi there. So, all right, can you tell me like your best case and your worst case scenario of gifts that you've either given or that you've gotten, where like maybe somebody put a lot of effort into it and you were like really disappointed, or you've gotten feedback, like where something was like way more valuable than you had anticipated,
Ooh, that's
or
interesting.
less?
For me, this one went a lot faster than I thought of. It was not only it was original art, but it was my one of my artists that I worked with would draw you as your favorite character, and
It's awesome.
that went like right away. Like it was gone. And he was like, well, should I add more of these to it? And I'm like, if you want to, you're the one drawing it. It's not. But yeah, that one went really, really well, as opposed to, and not saying that the other original art stuff didn't, but that one went really well.
All right, I'll tell you my it's, I kind of blocked it out, in fact. I totally forgot I did this.
Good question.
And it turned out great, except it was so painful to fulfill. I thought I would establish
Oh,
a
I know what
connection
you're
with my
talking about.
backers, the friendship bracelets. I thought I was being so smart. I would just do a limited number, and people will pay an extra premium to get a little friendship bracelet made by me that either said I love comics or maybe their name, and it just kind of went out of control. Because I actually don't know how to make friendship bracelets. It looks so easy. Girl Scouts make them. I'll just make them, So I'm there with the beads and everything, and in the end it was kind of fun, and people loved them. Like Becky Cloonan got one, and everybody, it was awesome. But I'm just cautioning you if you're going to do something like that.
I remember because
Did you get one?
No, we had dinner or something, and I was like, "Oh, how are the rewards going?" And she's like, "I have to make another friendship bracelet." And I was like, "What are you talking about?"
And here's the thing, because I thought I had worked it out. I had worked out the costs. The beads were not expensive. The beads, they come in A through Z. Of course, you're going to need more A's and E's. I had to keep buying these stupid packs of beads.
How many Z's do you have left?
Yeah, I got all. Does anyone need some Z's or W's?
Cute.
So if you're doing a project and you need a lot of Z's, we can get you a discount.
Yeah. So that was that.
George, have you heard of it?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. Nothing. I apologize. Nothing is coming to mind that is like that. I was like, oh goodness, that I haven't mentioned already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Sorry.
I'll tell you the one project I got, which I was worried about. It actually it ended up being fine. I got a piece of jewelry or something from my wife, and I knew it came in because the pin was sticking out of the envelope, and I was like, "Geez, I guess that's the thing that I got." And I had to find another backing for it, but I don't think they realized that a piece of metal was going to poke through their envelope. So, other questions? Do we have no other? Oh, okay, there we go.
So I've backed a couple of projects where instead of just the regular Kickstarter survey, it sort of sends you to a third-party site where you can sort of put together a cart and do add-ons. If any of you guys have an experience with that, would you recommend it? Is it like just for projects of a certain size, or?
I mean, the Kickstarter survey for me is like pretty spot on. I don't see any reason why you would need to go.
Yeah, I think you're probably talking about BackerKit, where So there's a third party. George, have you worked with BackerKit at all?
Like one, or is it two people I've worked with have worked with it. I mean, it's fine. I feel like it, in a way, defeats the reasoning behind doing like a Kickstarter, because it essentially just opens it up to being like a further larger pre-order. And the data formatting that they give you, like in terms of how it organizes the addresses, is, if you're working with a fulfillment center, where it direct feeds in a little easier, but I don't know. It's absolutely it's a point of view. Like I don't know. I do it, and whenever I work with people on Kickstarters, this is an opportunity to get your community really excited, get them involved, give them the unique experiences, and I feel like it diminishes it in a way. If you then go afterwards and go, oh, but wait, even though these things were sold out or they were supposed to be limited, you have an opportunity to now buy them again. For Augie, we actually did something where, because so many people wanted to do pre-orders for that thing, like we had to. After the campaign ended, there was such a demand. So what we didn't want to offer like anything that was like in the Kickstarter. We did like every version of that book is Kickstarter exclusive that's going out for that campaign. They all have a specific green foil, and so we put up just through like Celery, like a pre-order. And that was it. And it was just for, you can get the book, you can get the like book and the prints, and then there was like the book, the prints, and the leftover of the blanket that Zach really wanted to do. Like,
Wait, he did a blanket?
Yeah, one of the top things was he found / knew this person who did hand applique of, and I'm probably slaughtering the pronunciation.
This sounds insanely complicated already for a reward, but go ahead.
Well, so he bought all of these fleece yellow blankets because the Augie has in the book this shroud blanket that basically protects her from like evil like spirits and stuff. And so there's it has these eyes on it. And so found someone who would make the applique of the eyes and then sew them onto all these blankets. And so he was like, I want to do like, I can't remember if it was 10 or 25, and was paying this person to do that. And so there was just like a few left over, and that was it. But we felt like that didn't diminish that, since they were going to be on Amazon for pre-order anyways, the books. So, you know.
Do any of the three of you offer, I think at least two of you have retailer rewards, you know, where you have, so
Yep.
can you explain what that is real quick?
So for mine, I mean, it was you know, a way to get your book into shops if you know, your local comic shop wanted the book, but it packaged it so like my book on Kickstarter was going for $30. You got the book, and then like the retailer reward, I had two different levels. You get one where you got 5 books and one where you got 10, and in that 5 and 10, you could get any sort of combination of, excuse me, the hardcover, the paperback, or the variant cover within that at a discounted price.
And that's so if a retailer bought it, they could put it in their shop.
Yeah,
And
they
you
could
did
put it
that
in
as
their
well?
shop.
I did it as well because I think to me it's a no-brainer. If you're in comics, you want to get your comics into shops, and don't expect all these stores to like rush and sign up for it. But you will have fans or your local shops too. It's just an easy way to take care of that. Otherwise, you're knocking on doors for stores, and it's a real pain to do that. But for both my Kickstarters, I've had stores that happen to like my writing and will order books essentially that way. The thing to keep in mind is that a lot of stores, when they order books, especially from independent creators, they usually don't stock more than like 3 or 5. So just adjust accordingly. I've set up a website now for wholesale orders. I basically sell my books in packs of 3 now because I understand that's a sweet spot for them to carry your books. You know, they're not going to order 20 from you unless you're just fabulous, I suppose.
I would also just recommend like doing a 5. I did really well with 5, and it wasn't like I had a handful of retailers, but I got a lot of moms of my creators who would get like the mom like,
Oh my God, I never thought of that.
my kids
Yeah.
because I had like 50 some
Like
creators.
the gift box, the gift package.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, this is great. I can buy all these books and then give them for presents to different family members.
Totally
So
taking that idea.
Yeah.
I had so many moms.
That was part of your strategy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You
Fill
knew
it
it.
full of creators.
There you
and-
go. Yeah.
George, did you have any?
Yeah,
thoughts on
no,
that?
I mean, absolutely, it's totally a no-brainer. The other thing is that that gives you then a connection to those stores, which I mean, if you are a creator intending to work in this industry for a long period of time, having that direct connection to a buyer at a store that is obviously interested in your work is huge, because then if you do something that isn't on Kickstarter or you do something else, you have a direct connection with them. And, you know, I always recommend people, whenever they do that, you know, reach out to the store, talk to them, been like, oh, hey, like, how did you find out about the project? Like, what like, you know, made you like make the decision to buy? Like, I'd love to like talk. And, you know, that way you also know if you're ever doing, you know, the convention circuit, that sort of thing, you can then reach out to that store and say, hey, I'm going to be doing this convention that's nearby. Could I like stop in and do a signing or something like that? And, you know, it just helps you build like the community more.
And you could do the little value adds too, like say, okay, I'm going to put your store's name in the book. I'm going to put the logo. You're going on my website. I'll do anything. Just take my books.
This is great. How are we doing on time, Owen? Okay, 1 or 2 more questions. I see one there already.
A question about stretch goals. Have you guys had any experience with them, and how did they impact your rewards or your fulfillment? And sometimes you'll see stretch goals that increase the quality of the paper or the printing. Has that affected it negatively or positively in any kind of way?
For Unlawful Good, it was an anthology, and originally it was 16 short comic stories, and my first stretch goal was to add a 17th, and it was by another pair of creators. And so if we reached, you know, raised $1,500 more, Dirk Manning and Seth DeMoose would have their stories in there. And so not only, like, I mean, it was wonders for me because for the project and everything, because Dirk has a huge following in the horror community. And so, it got all of his
Yeah,
people
all his followers.
interested. And when your book is, already past the 150 page level, adding 8 pages really doesn't do much for your cost.
Yeah, it doesn't make it more expensive.
Nothing. So yeah, that was great for me.
Yeah, I think for the first Kickstarter, I didn't really understand how to do stretch goals, and I just barely made it with my first Kickstarter. And I think for the second one, I got a better handle on it. I think they are very useful, but it takes some figuring out what's going to work with your audience. I ended up using a stretch goal of adding 2 stories onto my book, and it did increase the weight. And I was doing floppy, so it did actually impact my mailing costs slightly, but it was worth it because up till then I had been writing all the stories. They've been illustrated by different artists, but this was my opportunity to bring in 2 new writers, and I think it was just a great experience, and I think people responded very positively to it. So the stretch goals we blew through that, so it was awesome.
Yeah, I think they're fantastic. It's a great way to kind of get exactly what you want. Whenever you start a project, think of what the ideal pie in the sky, most crazy version of the thing is that you want to do, and then recognize that, okay, well, you want this thing out, right? If you want the book to be covered in gold, real gold, that might be cost prohibitive. But if you would set like the good version that you love, that you would love completely and you think is really good is this. And so make that the base. And then go, all right, well, here are all these things that I know, like different treatments. So adding a jacket with a die cut, adding like gilded edges, which is foiling on the side. That's what we did for Augie. I mean, it's like 30 to 40 cents a unit, depending upon who you go with. It does add about a week and a half to production time, though. But I mean, that's stuff that's really cool that necessarily you don't need to make the thing that you want, but are really cool extras that whenever you're talking with, your manufacturer, printer, or anything like that, if you just ask them like, hey, what would the option be to do this thing? And then you have that, and you already have the cost, which is important. Never do anything without knowing the cost. It's the biggest tip ever. Don't do anything without knowing the cost. Yeah, I mean, another example is whenever you're costing out the book, ask the printer, if you think oh, I'm gonna need 250, ask for 100, 250, and 500, just so you know what that cost difference is. Because a lot of manufacturers, things like that, there's breaks, so,
Yeah.
I think,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say to you, on the subject of stretch goals, for me, this was my first ever comic project. This is my first ever project in Kickstarter. And so I was just ready to fail. I was just oh, it's probably not going to make it. No one knows who I am. No one knows who this project is. So I didn't go in with stretch goals in mind. And then when I reached my goal halfway into, the month, I had to scramble for stretch goals. So when you start, I would say have 1 or 2 stretch goals in mind, but don't count on getting there. That's the important thing. Don't make your stretch goals something that you are counting okay, our goal is $5,000, but I'm gonna plan this for 10 grand and it's gonna be the real deal. Don't plan for that because chances are you're not gonna double.
Yeah, I always tell creators that if you decide that you will consider stretch goals, there are some creators who don't. They just don't want to get, they want to just stay with the baseline and also do very well, by the way. It's not they're not hurt by that. But have them in mind. If you decide you're gonna do them, don't try to figure them out on the fly because it'll be difficult, it'll be stressful. I kind of know, going in. And then also think of stretch goals that might not add any real cost to you. If you're giving a digital copy of the comic, a stretch goal might be, oh, I'll give you the layouts that the artist did, or I'll give you 20 more character sketches in the digital version. Therefore, it's not adding to your print costs. Or when you're adding print pages, it doesn't cost anything to add a few more pages in terms of printing or shipping. But if you're paying your artist, it's going to cost more money. So the stretch goal I got pressured into that I swore I wouldn't do was issue 2 of the comic, and we were only looking for $10,000 and we got $54,000. So I felt like I had to do something, but I really didn't want to print it. So the happy medium we came up with is we would do the second issue of the comic, but we'd only do it digital, and it would only be black and white, so that my artist who does his own inking, he would only have to touch the pages. We wouldn't have to send them to a colorist and all that stuff. So, and then everybody was ecstatic when I added the second issue. So I felt like it was a really good, but I didn't want to get into like, oh, now we're picking multiple packages and now we're printing a whole separate book and all that kind of stuff. So, last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to know, did you have any problems with back orders? Like you sent something, but the backer never got it, or like it was sent back to you?
Good question, yeah.
Yes, definitely. That's why you make friends with your post office. Stuff will bounce back for inexplicable reasons. It's the absolute correct address and it gets bounced back. Then you go back and say, can you send it again? Don't pay again. Talk to them and say, there's been a mistake. You got it. That's kind of the stuff that you got to deal with.
I didn't experience this, and I haven't experienced it yet. I'm sure I will, because it's still early on, so stuff can still come back. But I had a friend who he did a Kickstarter in 2011, and just now got something sent back to him.
It's 2015.
Yeah.
Did they use a time machine? I mean, what?
He just got something sent back to him now, original art, a page. Yeah, and it never got to the person, and he has it now. And
I want to start a Kickstarter to find out where this thing was
Right.
for 4 years.
Where did it get held up? Yeah.
George, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, here's the sad truth. Probably 15 to, at worst, 30% of your international packages are going to vanish. That's it. You're going to wind up reshipping them. So that's sad.
15 to 30?
15 to 30%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like that bad. I mean, especially if you're not using a if you're not using a method that has tracking, that has a delivery confirmation on it. Yeah, that's just.
You're better off just throwing it in a river and hoping it washes up on the right country.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really sad because it also takes so long. Like, I mean, it's typically like 14 to 28 business days. And so, that's the biggest like issue that, I always like talk to people. I'm like, international backers, they're great. I love them, but they're going to be the weirdest problems you have because they're going to get they'll also get stuff where it's like half the package, it's clearly been opened by customs, but then for some reason like prints were removed or something random, and it's like, okay, well, we're going to ship that out again. Or like had someone who had like interior pages of a book torn out, and it wasn't it wasn't like to a country where like those pages were had content that was not approved. It was just random pages. So yeah, it's really weird.
I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one.
Yeah, no, really weird stuff. I mean, domestically, you might lose like 5 to 10. Like 10% was the worst I ever experienced. But typically it's like on the lower end. And that's usually because people move and they don't tell you. And then they message you literally a year or 2 years later and go, hey, yeah, like an example, we helped Ryan North with the To Be or Not To Be book project. 3 days ago, someone responded to the survey. This is a project that we shipped in like end of 2012, 2013. Yeah, no, it's like we finished shipping everything a year and a half, 2 years ago. So, and the person just responded to the survey, like the backer survey now. And it's like, okay, well, message the person, hey, so a couple of like the crazy tattoos and extras from stretch goals aren't available anymore. We can still ship you the book and stuff. Is that okay, or do you want a refund?
And then the best thing is they won't write you back for 2 years, so you can fund it down the line.
But then you've changed your email.
All right, well listen, we're done, so let's have a hand for our awesome panelists. I want to thank you all for coming. As the giant thing up here says, please join us in the gallery. There will be drinks. And also, if you are thinking about doing a comics project or another comics project, you can email comics@kickstarter.com, and we will be happy to look over your project and help you with it. And also, you can check out kickstarter.com/comics. But thank you, Heather. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, George. And thank you, audience. You were awesome.